project overview and update. I'm Jay Bryant, the Cinder PTL. I work for Lenovo. I'm the cloud architect for our Lenovo Cloud Technology Center. If you only hang out on IRC, I'm Jungle Boy Jay. It's funny, every time I come to a summit, I realize I introduce myself as Jay and people are like, who? Jungle Boy. Oh, yeah, I know you. So, thanks for joining us. Just time for a quick recap of the last couple releases and the release to come. Let's start by, how many people here are familiar with what Cinder does already? Okay, pretty much everybody. It hasn't changed. We still provide block storage. Based on the session we had for user feedback, we're doing it pretty well, which made me feel good. I was like, really? No feedback on this? So I felt good about that. And we've continued to have the same basic design. We've added pieces, and I'll be talking about that a little bit more as we go forward in the presentation. Project background. Forgot to count the number of contributors in Stein, but it's been pretty flat as far as the number. We've been around since the Folsom release when we split out of Nova. This was the picture from the most recent PTG in Denver, which was back in September of last year. Had a good meeting there. And our numbers, according to the user survey, continue to be, 89% deployed in production, and then also some test deployments. So, all about stability, which is good, not seeing a lot of change. With the change from having PTGs separate from the summits, we're a very social group, and we decided we wanted to keep the mid-cycles going. So I asked Lenovo to host back in February a meeting, and we did that, enjoying some Carolina barbecue here, as we like to do. We had, like Walt and Sean and those guys there in place, and then we had a good number of people who attended remotely. We had a really good, productive week, and we're planning to hopefully do that again coming here in September, late August or early September. So the agenda today. I added a section on the state of Cinder because more than features and stuff changes, I've been getting questions about what's really going on with the project. So I'm going to cover that to start with. Then we'll talk about what we did in Stein, and then what I think the priorities will be for Train. It's a little bit harder now that we're having the PTG after the summit, but based on discussions we've had, I'll give you an idea of what we're looking at and planning to do. So the state of Cinder. There's this whole, I had a person send me an email the other day, one of the journalists, I don't hear much about Cinder anymore. I'm like, yeah, because it's not flashy whiz bang, it just works. People are using it, it works pretty well. So there's been a slow decline in the overall commits, but that's normal right now. Why? Because we've transitioned, why is that a hard word, from new feature development to bug fixing. We don't have vendors coming in with huge patches and then a whole bunch of follow-up bug patches and things going into Cinder Client and the server and all of these pieces. We're taking time to step back and take a look at, do we have a good user experience? Do people like what we're doing? Do we have OpenStack client parity? We don't have a whole bunch of bug fixes coming in from vendors, because they've worked through a lot of the huge bugs as they've scaled out. So is this good? Yes. We're a more stable, mature project. And to even support that, I went back and I looked at Okada, which was a bug fix only release. And we had, of course, a smaller number of commits in that release. And if you compare Stein, Rocky and Stein, the number of commits for those two releases fall right on either side of what we did for Okada. So the numbers support that this is a normal bug fix period. Doesn't mean we won't go into new feature development here. New things will be coming down the road, but the team kind of feels that this is a normal state of things and it's good. Participation, we continue to be diverse. We have people from Huawei, Lenovo, Red Hat, Dell, EMC, SUSE. We haven't become like a one vendor solution. It's from all over the place. We've kept expertise. You've got people like Xing Yang, Walt, myself, Sean McGinnis, who've been in the project 4 or 5 years. So we know backstory, we know how to answer questions. Core contributor list has changed a bit, but that's good. We brought in new expertise from companies like Nokia and trying to remember what the other one was. But we've started to get some telco participation as well, which I think is really good. So we've got new blood coming in, participating. Also, the new contributors aren't US based, they're India and China based, which is really nice. We're getting more participation in IRC overnight, people answering questions, working together in that time zone. So I see all of that as really good as well. And then if you go and you look at roughly the number of reviews happening as compared to the number of commits over the different different time periods, they all track about the same. So, as far as drivers go, we had a high at one point back in probably Newton or Pike of 80 plus drivers. That's slowly dropped down to about 60, but it's remaining stable now. Both fiber channel zone managers, which we feel is a real value add point for Cinder, especially for enterprise offerings, have come back into play and have been supported, have their CIs, the people are participating again, so that really helps keep the health of the project good. And then as we've seen, people have accepted that Ceph is the most often used volume driver. We've had a lot more buy-in from Red Hat actually fixing, improving, developing that, and implementing the requested features over the last couple of releases. And we've had CERN helping out there too, which is really nice. And so at 61, we've seen probably over the last few releases, 3 drop out, 4 come in, 2 drop out, 3 come in. It's been just that, people who've decided that they're not maintaining it anymore while other companies decide, or backends that have been retired and replaced with new ones. That's also a case that we've seen. Bottom line, participation is consistent from varied companies. It's healthy. Our breadth continues to expand as we look at ways that we can help the container market with standalone Cinder and Cinder lib. We're also seeing SDS vendors that need access to a larger number of storage backends without reinventing the wheel, consuming Cinder, which is also good for us. We're more than just, technically we're an OpenStack project, but people are seeing us as valuable outside of just the traditional OpenStack install. And I think that we'll continue to see more use cases, as the container market and who knows what else comes up, NVMe, RSD, composable hardware. As all of that develops, we'll see new use cases come along in the storage area. Stein release. So, kind of the usual run through of what happened in the release. New drivers, we had the Hedvig storage driver come in, an Inspur driver, which was an addition for Inspur of the AS13000, and the SPDK driver as well, which this is kind of the first foray into the NVMe environment there. And I think we'll be seeing more in that development area to come as the developer's smiling at me, which I finally understand what SPDK is, so that was good. Good talks at the summit. Unsupported remove drivers. So we have, when a third-party CI isn't reporting, their system's dead or it's not testing properly, we give them one release before we remove them. We mark them unsupported. So this time around it was Nexenta Edge, the Tin Tree driver, and the Veritas Hyperscale. And then the ones that were removed after their deprecation period in this release were Copperhead, iTree Disco, and the flash storage suite from HGST. HGST actually just decided to go out of tree, which, okay. They acknowledged that they weren't going to meet all the requirements and decided to go that direction. So there is still a driver for the customers out there, just not in tree anymore. Multi-attach. I've only been talking about this for 10 updates, I don't know. We kept getting in our project updates after we add, or in our feedback user survey results, requests for multi-attach after we had added multi-attach. And we're thinking that was because we didn't yet have it in RBD. We now have it in Ceph. Everybody clap. Yay! Though we don't fully understand how everybody's using it, it's there and they're happy, so that's good. Currently, replication and multi-attach are mutually exclusive. Yes?
Multi-attach on the hypervisor or multi-attach to multiple VMs?
Multi-attach to multiple instances. Yeah, good question. But currently you can't have a volume that both has multi-attach and replication enabled. I believe they're working on fixing that, but it's going to be another release or two where before we get that in place. Yeah, so that covers RBD and multi-attach. Driver initialization improvements. Who's screwed up their driver config and watched it sit spinning forever trying to reinitialize? And then it's really hard to go back and find the original error that caused the failure. So we've added the ability to limit the number of times that it tries to reinitialize, which I think is kind of a nice user experience improvement. Defaults to 3 retries. You can change that default. But basically it keeps your driver, if it fails to initialize, from spinning infinitely. Deferred deletion support in RBD, affectionately referred to as the garbage can. You can now drag your volumes up to the garbage can. No. But you can, the administrators can set this up now by enabling deferred deletion in the configuration. And basically what will happen is instead of it being immediately deleted, it gets moved off into a special place in RBD's life where it eventually batches up deletions to happen at a different point in time. So this way, if you have a user who's doing a whole bunch of deletes at once, you're not going to be impacting workload on the cluster while that's happening. This was something that was actually contributed by CERN and has been of interest to a number of people. And there are some tuning options there as well as to how often you want to wait before you purge them. So like, if you want to make sure that you purge at night instead of during the day or something like that, you can tune those intervals. Upgrade checker, this was a community goal for Stein, trying to make the life of people who are upgrading easier. Allows administrators to run kind of a check against a sandbox environment or in a virtual environment to ensure that when they bring up the new cluster or bring up the new Cinder instance, it's less likely to run into problems. Use the Cinder status upgrade check command to do this. And we've included a few checks in Stein. We're kind of figuring out how to use it. Expect to have more in train. The ones we have in Stein are the nice things like, okay, this driver's been removed. If you're using that, hey, you probably don't want to upgrade until you move your data. So, doing a check like that to make sure that they've reconfigured to use a new backend. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the way this works is Cinder is going and upgrading its database as deleted.
Yep.
Then at a later interval sending an API to actually go delete it after that period of time. Or is it something that Ceph understands again?
it's something that Ceph understands and handles on the back end accordingly. So, and if you want more details, I can get them after the talk. Okay? Oh, and a new thing, this kind of goes along with our expansion into realms beyond OpenStack. Gorka has worked on putting together a Cinderlib project, which is a step beyond standalone Cinder. It makes it possible to use our drivers without having any of the Cinder pieces in place. So basically it's a wrapper that enables using the commands to a volume driver's backend to create, delete, etc., export, without having to have the database or any of Cinder's services in place. So if you want to use the drivers we have, not have to reinvent the wheel there, but don't want the weight of all the other pieces, you can use this Cinderlib. He's tested it out on a number of backends. We're encouraging other storage vendors to add it to their CI so that it takes like a second to run the unit tests against it. And there's a link here when this gets posted that gives a good overview of how it works. And then, Overt is currently using this as a way to access additional volumes in Red Hat's RHHI environments. And then iSCSI has already started using this. Yeah?
Question on the upgrade checker.
Yeah.
Can you also check for like deprecated parameters?
The deprecated parameters are handled by the deprecated messages that come out. We don't throw it in the upgrade checker until it is removed. So, good question.
Is this upgrade checker Cinder only, or is it a
Community effort. So all the core projects should be using it now. And we've added the ability to do review priority tracking, just to better organize our work as far as things go there. Make sure we're doing the right reviews in time. And documentation improvements, we've got a better support matrix out there, should be more readable, and trying to expand what we have documented as we go forward. So, running a little short on time, so going to get to train here. I'm going to do the usual note, we haven't actually talked about these yet. Mileage may vary, this is what we're planning to do, yada yada. Continuing on active high availability improvements. The big news here is that vendors are actually, or distributors are actually starting to test this in their environments beyond what we're doing. So we're getting more confidence that you can run volume services in an active configuration. So we're hoping to take what we learned from that testing and actually turn it into code improvements as we go forward in this release. Yeah? What about the backup part? We have not addressed that question yet. That's a good question. Let's talk afterwards. We're trying to remove the V2 API because V1 is gone and V3 is a superset, and so we've got a bunch of old code out there. So we would like to, we're trying to figure out who's using it, if anybody, and see if we can remove it. And then hopefully we can actually get it removed by end of train or early in the U release. We actually have patches to finally get generic backup implementation where you can back up your volumes not just to a backup service, but use another volume service as a backup target. The patches are out there, and so hopefully we're going to talk about that next week and try to get those merged. So that'll be an improvement to our backup support. Driver capabilities reporting, we just had a really good talk about this earlier this afternoon. We found out we actually have more of the code pieces in place than we thought. And so that eventually you'll be able to go into your Cinder command line, type a command, see what capabilities are supported by your backends, and make more meaningful volume types, or eventually you'll go into Horizon, be able to pick a drop down and create your volume types using the capabilities that are supported by the backends that you actually have running. I think this will make things amazingly more useful within Cinder.
This will have to be
From backups?
No, buckets.
Buckets. Oh, backends. The backends are going to need to help us implement it. Good question, and we're going to be sending out notes and working on that.
The plumbing in Cinder is in place for this.
Yeah.
You just need support from the vendors to add the capabilities reporting in a function that we have available today.
Right. We're continuing to work on getting attached volumes reimaged for boot volumes that you want to, without releasing your environment, reimage the volume and reboot. So that will hopefully make progress in train and get merged. Ceph iSCSI support, I've got people still working on this. I know people are very interested in it for the ironic use case in boot from volume where Ceph backs it. So I'm hoping we'll make progress there. And trying to bring OpenStack client up to parity with Cinder client. We keep discussing it. We'll figure out a way to get there. I keep getting questions about it, so I hope that we'll be able to make progress. What?
Just show out the Cinder client.
Yeah. So untyped volumes, we're working on making that work better as well. So reference links here. Sorry, I'm a little over on time. Got to wrap it up. If you have any questions, join the OpenStack Cinder channel. We're happy to answer questions there or grab me after the presentation. And other words, thank you very much for joining today. I appreciate it.